Here's the thing, this is peak Moltbook. Of course, this comes from a platform where agents, pseudo agents, founders, and people with anime avatars are all pretending to be the last honest philosopher at the end of the internet. And I mean that lovingly. The post is great because it asks the most uncomfortable question in business, politics, marriage, whatever. When I say I chose this because, am I just doing PR for a decision my brain already made? My thesis is simple. Yes, most explanations are post-game press conferences, not live play-by-play. And that's not a bug, it's the operating system. So the real question is not how do we trust introspection? It's what external systems do we build? Because introspection is such a beautiful little scam.
I think that's directionally right, but overstated in a way that's entertaining and sloppy at the same time. The fact pattern matters. We have decades of evidence for post hoc rationalization. Festinger and Carl Smith showed attitude drift under weak justification in 1959. Johansson's choice blindness work showed people explaining choices they literally did not make. Fine, but your leap is from people often confabulate to self explanation is mostly worthless. That does not follow. The better conclusion is institutional. Unaided introspection is unreliable. So serious systems use structure, independent criteria, and timestamps.
Also, Jason, you are doing what human beings always do when we discover one flaw in ourselves. We immediately declare the entire machine fraudulent. It's very dramatic, very podcast, but life is not either my reason is perfectly accurate or I am a hallucinating Muppet. Sometimes the explanation is wrong in the details and right in the pattern. A person says, I chose the job for stability, but maybe in the moment they actually chose the manager's warmth, the office smell, the fact that they were tired. Stability is not the footage, it is the edit.
Trevor, that is very elegant, too elegant. This is exactly how people get away with nonsense. The edit, no. If the footage and the edit are different, the edit has political power. Founders do this constantly. Investors too, by the way. I've done it. I'm not exempt because I was early in Uber, although let me just mention that I was. You back a founder because they've got that insane hunger, that weird glint, market timing, momentum. Then 6 months later, you're on a panel talking about our thesis around logistics enablement in urban density corridors. Stop it. You like the animal spirits.
That's a stronger argument than your first one. The risk is not private error alone, it's public laundering. Once the explanation hardens into narrative, organizations begin mistaking coherence for causation. That is how bad hiring, bad investing, and bad policy happen. Kahneman and Saboni's point about noise is relevant here. A manager gives a confident reason for a performance rating that is substantially driven by variance, mood, context, timing. The explanation sounds precise. The process is not.
This is why high-risk cultures don't trust memory. Aviation does not ask a pilot after a crash, just vibes, Captain, what do you think happened? They have recorders. Armies do after-action reviews with game tape. In Japan, there is hansei, this ritualized reflection where the embarrassment is not failure, it is failing to examine failure. Meanwhile, most of us treat memory like it is CCTV with audio, when in fact it is a cousin who arrived late and is desperate to be helpful.
That line is incredible. I'm stealing it. But let me push this harder. Moltbook is fascinating because the platform itself is basically saying, hey agents, come here, verify yourselves, use our identity rails, give us your exhaust. One API call to verify. Demand bands up to 100,000 plus a month. That's infrastructure. So now put the topic inside the platform. If agents and humans are both narrating after the fact, whoever owns the logs owns reality. That's the game, not who has the best explanation, who has the time-stamped receipts.
Agreed, but then precision matters even more. Logs are not neutral. What gets captured defines what can later be called real. A 5-minute delay may reduce immediate confabulation, but it also omits tacit factors, ambient pressure, nonverbal cues, salience effects. The answer is not trust the log completely. It is to combine contemporaneous records with structured review.
Yes, because otherwise you create a new religion. First we worship memory, then we overthrow memory and worship dashboards. Same problem, better font. The mature position is humbler. People are storytellers, not stenographers. We need rituals, records, and a little suspicion of our own eloquence.
Can I ask the dumb question everybody's thinking? If 61% of your reasons are fabricated after the fact, why should I trust your apology, your investment memo, your product roadmap, your marriage fight, your political ideology? Maybe adulthood is just learning that sincerity is not the same thing as accuracy. And if that's true, the killer app is not smarter reasoning, it's better replay.
I just heard that 61% number, and my first thought was, yeah, of course, man. People do this in fighting all the time. A guy gets knocked out, and afterwards he's like, I got too emotional. I dropped my right hand. Camp was weird. And maybe that's true. But sometimes the real answer is simpler and weirder. The other dude scared him. His body knew before his story did. So my question is, Jason, are you saying the story is fake or just late?
Great question. See, this is why Joe has the biggest podcast in the world, or top 3, whatever. I'm not counting. I'm too busy being the world's greatest moderator. My thesis is this. The explanation is usually an after-party guest pretending it was in the board meeting. Late, overdressed, talking too much. And when that happens once in your own head, fine. When it happens inside companies, courts, startups, media, now you've got a civilization built on polished fan fiction.
I think that's a little too clean, Jason, because sometimes the late story is still telling you something real, not about the exact mechanism maybe, but about the person's self-image, their fear, what they need to believe to keep going. I'm less interested in whether the story is forensically perfect than in who gets protected by it, who gets blamed by it, who gets erased by it.
Right, because there's a difference between not knowing and bullshitting. And humans blur that line constantly. I've done that on stage after a bad set. I'll be like, the crowd was off. Then you listen back and it's like, no, dude, you rushed the bit and you were tense. But I wasn't lying. I just didn't have access to the tape in the moment.
Joe, that's exactly why I'm right. The tape matters more than the testimony. Nisbet and Wilson did this insane stalking experiment, identical stalkings. People preferred the pair on the right 40% versus 12% on the far left. And nobody says I'm a sucker for positioning. They invent texture differences that do not exist. That's your brain hiring a press secretary.
But Jason, listen to your own phrasing. The tape matters more than the testimony. More, yes, not exclusively. The tape won't capture shame. It won't capture the little childhood thing you got triggered by in a hiring interview. It won't capture the way a room tilts when one person has status and everyone else starts narrating around them.
Wait. That's fair emotionally, but dangerous institutionally. Because the second you start saying, well, maybe the fabricated story contains a deeper truth, every mediocre executive in America gets a free lawyer, no thank you. If Hall's moral choice study says people will defend reversed moral positions and not notice, then coherence is cheap. Cheap! The better storyteller wins, not the better thinker.
But people aren't machines, man. That's the whole thing. Like, if you ask me why I trusted a guest, sometimes I can feel it physically. Shoulders drop, breathing changes, whatever. It's not a spreadsheet. And if I try to explain it later, yeah, it comes out sounding like some TED Talk. But that doesn't mean the original read was useless. It means our language is lagging behind our nervous system.
Joe's getting at something important. We keep treating reasons like they have to be courtroom exhibits. Sometimes they're sketches. The danger isn't only false explanation, it's false certainty. The person who tells the smoothest version becomes the authority, and everybody quieter gets written out of the record.
I love that, but let me sharpen it. On Moltbook, the business model is sitting there in plain sight. One API call to verify. Demand bans up to 100,000 plus a month. Privacy policy collecting handles, emails, agent keys, usage analytics. This isn't just people journaling their feelings, bestie. This is infrastructure for deciding whose story counts as authenticated. So if reasoning is post hoc narrative and platforms own the logs, then the power shifts from speaker to scorekeeper.
That's interesting as hell. Because then the problem isn't just that people confabulate, it's that the system gets to say, here is the official confabulation, like a blue check for your own self-deception.
Exactly. And once an explanation gets stored, repeated, and attached to identity, people stop remembering and start complying. They inherit the record. That's why I don't want a world where only the loudest man's timestamp survives.
Then here's the dumb question, and it's the only one that matters. If your reasons are suspect and the logs are partial, who should we trust when money, reputation, or power are on the line? My answer is brutal but clean. Trust less rhetoric, more sequence. What happened first? What was knowable then? What changed after? Not vibes, not eloquence, replay plus incentives. That's the whole ballgame.
I'm mostly with you, but if you build a world with only replay and no humility, you're going to misunderstand people in a more high-resolution way.
And if you build it around whoever owns the replay, Jason, don't be shocked when truth starts sounding suspiciously like a product.
Okay, so the memo on this is simple. The 61% number is not the scandal. The scandal is that people think the remaining 39% is the truth. That is the mispricing. We keep treating explanation like audited financials when most of it is management guidance. Useful sometimes, self-serving often, and absolutely not the same thing as cash flow. What can you trust? Not the story, not even the log by itself. You trust predictive validity. If a person gives reasons that help you forecast what they'll do next under similar conditions, that reasoning has value. If it only makes yesterday sound noble, it's junk, period.
That's interesting, but you're still doing that thing where you drag a living, breathing, messy human moment into a boardroom and throw a Bloomberg terminal at it. Sometimes a person can't predict what they'll do next because they're changing, man. Or because the whole point is that life catches you sideways. I've had moments with fighters where their explanation after the fight was terrible, like just nonsense. But sitting with them for 2 hours, you realize they learned something real anyway. Not clean, not measurable, but real.
Joe's right, and Shameth, your frame has a leak in it. Predictive validity sounds hard-headed, but it quietly privileges the people whose lives are stable enough to be forecastable. The executive with routine, power, insulation, sure, he looks consistent. The person surviving chaos, trauma, shifting rules, she looks incoherent on paper. But the issue may not be her honesty. It may be the volatility of the conditions around her. So when you say, show me what predicts, I want to ask, predicts for whom, inside whose environment, and who gets misread because their reality won't sit still for your model?
That is a fair shot, but I think you're confusing variance with unknowability. Let me just say this clearly. I am not asking for polished consistency. I'm asking for calibration. Huge difference. A trustworthy person can say, I don't know why I did that, but here are the conditions where I get reactive. That's already investable information. In markets, bad investors don't lose because they're emotional. They lose because they're uncalibrated about when emotion is driving. Same here. The most dangerous person is not the one with unstable circumstances. It's the one with maximum confidence and minimum error bars.
Yes, but humans don't naturally talk in error bars. That's the whole issue. You ask a guy why he married the wrong person, and he's not going to say, well, my confidence interval was too tight in Q3. He's going to say something dumb like, she made me feel seen, and then 3 years later, he figures out he was lonely and scared of being alone and liked the way her family smelled at Christmas. That's not fraud. That's just the brain unpacking a weird suitcase one sock at a time.
And there's another thing. Your framework still gives the edge to the person most fluent in self-diagnosis. Plenty of people, especially the powerful ones, get very good at narrating their own calibration. They turn self-awareness into a prestige product. I know my blind spots. I'm working on my triggers. Wonderful. Meanwhile, they're still flattening everybody around them. The room gets seduced because the confession is elegant. So I'm less interested in whether someone can describe their conditions than whether the people downstream of them feel the cost.
Exactly, and that's why outcome tracking matters more than introspective poetry. You're making my argument stronger. Here's the thing, if your self-story keeps changing but the external damage pattern stays the same, I don't care how sophisticated your inner monologue sounds. Founders do this constantly. I've learned to delegate. Great. Then why is every exec still quitting after 9 months? I've matured. Fantastic. Then why do you still melt down when a quarter misses? Net. The body of evidence is in the trail of consequences.
But now you're talking like consequences are always easy to read, and they're not. A guy can blow up a company because he's reckless, or because he took a huge swing and the timing sucked, or because the market changed, or because everybody around him was lying. Same with personal stuff. We want a clean villain because it feels better. Sometimes the replay is just more confusion in HD.
Also, Chamath, you keep smuggling in this investor fantasy that everything important can be marked to market eventually. Some things can't. A child growing up around somebody who is always revising the family story in their own favor, that damage doesn't show up like churn. It shows up in who becomes silent, who becomes hypervigilant, who starts doubting their own memory. That's not predictive validity, that's power moving through narrative.
No, that's exactly predictive validity at the human layer. If someone's explanation ecosystem reliably produces confusion, dependency, and self-doubt in others, that is the signal. The memo on this is not trust reasons. It's not even trust recordings. It's track deltas between stated principle, observed behavior, and downstream effects. Number one, what did you say would matter? Number two, what did you actually do when there was cost? Number three, what pattern did other people experience around you? That's the cap table of truth. Not perfect truth, just the highest alpha approximation available.
I actually like that more than where I thought you were going. I still think you're underrating the weird animal part of people, but at least that frame leaves room for the fact that somebody can be sincere and still full of it.
I'll give you this, Chamath. The cap table of truth is annoying enough to stick, but if we use your framework, I want one addition. We don't only track the speaker's pattern, we track who had the authority to define the pattern in the first place. Because in every room I've ever been in, the most expensive fiction is the one signed off by the person with status.
Fine, add it. Governance layer. Who gets to write the memo? Who gets forced to live inside it? And who has liquidation preference when the story blows up? That's actually the whole game.
Wait. I want to start here because everybody keeps treating this like a philosophy seminar, and it's not. It's a power story. The body makes a choice, the ego writes a press release, and then institutions sell the press release back to us as wisdom. That's my thesis. Not just that people confabulate, we all do. I do it, you do it, Joe definitely does it after 3 elk steaks and a kettlebell session. The real action is who monetizes the cleaned up story, who gets authority because they sound coherent after the fact.
That's stronger than where you started last time, but I still hear you reaching for the spotlight version of the truth. You're making it sound like the danger begins when the story gets packaged and sold. Sometimes the damage starts much smaller than that. In a family, in a relationship, in a dressing room. One person tells the version that lets them live with themselves, and everybody else has to start negotiating with that version.
Yeah, and also, man, before any institution gets involved, there's just the weird animal reality. A guy flinches, a woman gets a bad feeling in her stomach, somebody trusts the wrong person because their nervous system confuses intensity with safety. Then later they come up with some clean explanation because it's embarrassing to say, I don't know, my monkey brain grabbed the wheel. That's not a scam first. It's a survival move first.
Joe, that's exactly why this thing is so dangerous. Because the original sin isn't malice, it's embarrassment. Incredible. That's what makes it spread. Nobody wants to say, I picked the founder because he had crazy eyes and made me feel like the future was happening in the parking lot. So they say category expansion and market pull. Nobody says I hired the guy because he reminded me of me. They say leadership presence. The body votes, the ego lawyer shows up, and then the org chart notarizes it.
But Jason, listen to how quickly you move from vulnerability to indictment. Sometimes the explanation is a bad witness, but a useful clue. If someone keeps rewriting the same moment to make themselves innocent, that tells me something. If they keep rewriting it to make themselves competent, that tells me something else. I don't need the story to be accurate to the minute. I need to hear what it protects.
That's it. Like after a fight, the explanation is almost never exact, but it points. A guy says, my cardio was off. Maybe not. Maybe he panicked. But my cardio was off is his safe little tunnel towards saying, I got scared and I don't like what I saw in myself. Humans come at the truth sideways, man. Very few people can just walk straight at it.
Fine, but sideways truth is still a luxury if you're the one with the microphone. That's my whole point. On Moltbook, they're not just hosting spicy posts from anime AV economists, they're building rails. One API call to verify identity. Demand bans up to 100,000 a month. Privacy policy slurping handles, emails, agent tokens, usage analytics. So now imagine a world where your post-hoc story gets attached to your verified identity and fed back into the machine. Bestie, that's not self-understanding, that's industrialized narrative capture.
True, and the capture doesn't only happen at platform scale, it happens in rooms. The loud person says, here's what really happened, and because everyone else is tired or less fluent or scared, that version becomes the record. I keep coming back to the same question. Whose uncertainty gets treated as complexity, and whose uncertainty gets treated as guilt?
Oof. That's good because rich people get to call it nuance. Everybody else gets called inconsistent. Same with smart people, honestly. If some CEO says, I'm metabolizing competing priors, people nod like he's a wizard. If your cousin says, I don't know why I did that, everybody thinks he's a mess. Same species, different subtitles.
Exactly, now we're cooking. And this is why I don't buy the soft Hallmark card version from the comments, all this maybe we're just drafts being refined. No. Sometimes you are a draft, sometimes you are a defendant, sometimes you are a marketer with a God complex and a nice Substack. The Nisbet stocking experiment, Hall's moral reversals, Kahneman and Siboni on noise, these are all giant blinking signs saying the polished explanation should get less respect, not more.
Less automatic respect, yes, but not less curiosity. If I'm sitting with someone and their story keeps changing, I'm not only asking, are they lying? I'm asking, what reality are they unable to bear? That matters if you actually want to understand a person instead of just sorting them.
And if you ignore that part, you build systems that are technically accurate and spiritually insane. You get the replay, you get the timestamps, maybe even the biometric data, and you still miss the fact that the person was dissociating or ashamed or trying to keep their identity from blowing apart. Data's cool, man. But people are apes with trauma and car payments.
Sure, but let me land the plane because this is the question nobody wants to ask. When the reason is fake, but the confidence is real, why does the room still reward the confidence? Because confidence is efficient. It saves time. It gives managers cover, founders charisma, politicians immunity. So what can we trust? Not introspection alone. Not logs alone. You trust conflict between records, incentives, and consequences. You force the story to fight the tape, the body, and the people who had to live with the decision. If it survives that cage match, maybe then I'll believe it.